Are you listening?
Welcome to The Roar, the reaction podcast for fans of the Detroit Lions. My name is Demetrius, and I've got my super producer, Mr. Mike Ward. We hope you enjoy the podcast. If you do, please go to wherever you find your podcast and give us 5 stars. Give us a positive review. Any feedback is good. You can also email us, if you're old school, at roarmotorcity@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at CityRoar. CityRoar. This podcast, what we hope to do is give you the real fan reaction on the latest Lions game. That process we go through, win or lose, apparently tie should be in there as well. Whatever happens, we'll break it down from that passionate fan perspective. And the goal is to record this podcast, even if we don't post it until maybe Monday or a day later. I want to do my best to record it as close to the end of the game as possible. And today, we're about an hour and a half after what I can only call a debacle out in Arizona. 24-6 lead in the fourth quarter, but somehow, yes, the game ends in a tie. As far as I'm concerned, it's a loss. They'll tell you it was a tie. They'll put a tie in their record books. And maybe someday down the line, I'll be able to consider this a tie. But I'm going to tell you right now, this feels like a loss. It was hard to watch, hard to talk about still, but that's the point of this podcast. So I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to try and keep this together and go through this thing and break it down, and hopefully I will feel better when I'm done. And if you're listening, hopefully you'll feel better after you listen to it. So let's start with the particulars. Pretty simple. 27-27 tie. I don't even feel like going through all the stats. They had 477 total yards, the Lions did. The Cardinals had 387. Penalties is something I will always bring up because in my mind, there are a couple of key factors to every game. Outside of all of the basic statistics that you can go through and pinpoint and talk about. But for me, one that always stands out, always makes a difference, are penalties. And it is part, how many, right? The total number. And the Lions had 9. That's not it, though. Sometimes it's the kinds of penalties. What type of penalties were they? Were they pass interference penalties that kept drives alive? Were they, false starts or holding penalties that killed drives? Penalties are an indication of coaching. And we are going to talk a lot about coaching today. Like I said, we're 90 minutes after the game. And if you watched it, you can understand why I sound the way I sound. First of all, that's the point of the podcast. I wanted to calm down and try and come into it and just break it down, right? That's unrealistic when you're a Lions fan. So that's not going to happen. They had 9 penalties. There were dumb penalties. There were face mask. There was a penalty called on a guy for running out of bounds. I want to say it was Tracy Walker, but I could be mistaken. He got called for unsportsmanlike conduct on a punt because he ran out of bounds. That's how funny this is, right? Turnovers, another key. I think there were, and I should have this exact stat in front of me, but it really doesn't matter. I think Stafford fumbled twice. I know he lost one of them. The Jamal Agnew muffed punt we'll get to. But Stafford didn't throw any interceptions, though. But penalties, turnovers, these are discipline issues. These are coaching issues. These are things that lose you football games that are not about effort. They're not about your understanding of the playbook. They're about focus. They're about concentration. And that's just on the players. Now, with that said, I'm not going to blame the players today. I generally will look at look at a loss in particular, even a win, and say, wow, there's a whole lot of blame or credit to go around. I will generally come on and give you 5, 7, 10 reasons why they won or lost. Not today. Not today, not this one. And yes, I said loss because this is a loss. I mean it. I don't care what they tell you. That's a loss. We all know. Everyone who's ever rooted for this football team knows, and a whole lot of people who have never rooted for this football team. We all know this tie is going to come back and bite us in the ass. We know it. We know it. I could lay it out for you. I want to focus on today's game, but I already see the last game against the Packers. And this tie is going to be it. We know it. I already know it, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm somehow going to keep coming back for more. I'm going to keep coming back for more. I don't even know why, but I know it. This game is not about the players. I'm going to talk about a couple of guys later as the format lays out. But this game's about coaching. The particulars of this game, the one particular I want to point out that really stands out to me is that Kyler Murray in the fourth quarter of the game, just the fourth quarter, was 20 for 29, 238 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's an entire game for a lot of people. This is what Kyler Murray did in the fourth quarter. Now, his overall numbers, if I do the math right, he's like 9 of 20-ish with 80 yards the rest of the game. His total was 29 of 54, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. That's his entire game stats. The fourth quarter, he was 20 of 29, 238, and 2 touchdowns. They led the game 24-6 in the fourth quarter. The Lions led the game 24-6 in the fourth quarter. So what happened? We'll get there. We'll get there. This one is tough. The particulars don't even matter to me. I'm not even going to dig into how many rushing yards they had, or I don't even care. I don't even care. This was a loss. No matter what they try and tell you, the nebulous metaphorical they, no matter what they say, this was a loss. And if you're a Lions fan, it feels like a loss. If you're a fan of another team, you can look and go, oh, the Lions got a tie, and I've already had people texting me going, well, at least they didn't lose. Well, you didn't watch the game and you're not a Lions fan because it feels like a loss. So as far as the particulars go, none of it really matters.
Damn.
Because they found a way to, I almost said it. There are a couple of things I will never say. I'm going to say it this time just to let you know. These words won't come out of my mouth. Very popular amongst Lions fans and so appropriate today, but I'm only going to say it to reference it. The term is SOL, and it's not what you think. SOL in my world is same old Lions. And I hate the saying. I generally don't like to hear people say it. I couldn't be mad at them if they said it today. But I'm going to try my best to not use that term ever because I really don't like it. But man, if there was ever a time for me to give someone a waiver to use that term, it would be today. It really would. So we're going to start with a segment we call blah, blah, blah. Mike was smart this segment. He had a really good understanding of how post-game commentary works. The idea was, hey, let's look and see what they say after the game. Let's get the something that they kick back. What's the feedback literally from the players and coaches? What is their feedback? Now we understood, and Mike and I were very aware that they don't say anything. This is a fruitless effort. This is mostly right off the top to try and inject some humor into the podcast because NFL players and coaches have perfected the art of talking without actually saying a word. And today was no different. Today was actually worse. I was pissed after the game ended. A lot of us had to be. I debated cutting this segment out of the podcast because I knew it would just make me more angry. And it's not real anger. It's not real life. This isn't even like meaningful, right? But I spend a week listening to sports talk radio every day to hear about the Lions. I invested 2 hours into a pregame show. Yes, I listened to the pregame show. Yes, I do. And then I invested 4 full hours of my life for that game. And it's hard when you invest in just a day. This is my Sunday. This is my Sunday. And it was a late start today. So I was able to get up and do some podcast prep and a few things. This is a day that I've invested. So when Matt Patricia comes to the microphone after the post game, and yes, I'm exasperated. I'm not a professional broadcaster or a journalist. So I will sigh into the microphone and I will stutter and stumble over words because this stupid game just ended 90 minutes ago. And it was a tie. Ugh. I'd rather they lost. I don't care how that sounds. Ugh. Okay, so Patricia comes to the mic and they say, "How are you feeling about the game?" And this guy says essentially 4 things. It's a 60-minute game. We have to play the whole game. We have to turn the page. We have to fix some stuff. And we have to do a better job. And my responses are, duh, and really. What? That's it? Because I am one of those myopic fans that believe at least you can try and make me feel better. Give it a shot. Say something. Try and make me feel better. Don't come to the microphone and say we got to do a better job. His words, not my bad grammar, his bad grammar. We got to do a better job. The players got to do a better job. We got to do a better job coaching. And I'm going to get to the coaching, I promise. We got to do a better job. We got to turn. I haven't turned the page. I've not turned the page. I'm not going to turn the page for another day and a half. Because you got to do a better job. Duh. Really? Really? So blah, blah, blah is, the concept is funny when Mike first mentioned it. And I thank you, Mike, for that. It is even more funny after the very first game, our opening regular season podcast. This guy, and I would love to tell you what my brother wants to mail Matt Patricia, but it's my podcast and I would like it to be entertaining. I would like it to be cathartic. I would like it to be meaningful. And I kind of think I'd get in trouble if I said it. So it was a tremendous laugh and I needed it. But I can pretty much guarantee you that the blah, blah, blah segment is not funny because of what he just said. With every podcast, and I hope you listen and I hope you recommend it to your friends. But if you do, warn them that the blah, blah, blah segment will be me saying the same thing over and over and over every week, because win or lose, Matt Patricia is probably going to say the same stupid thing every week. Even when they win, he's going to try and be magnanimous and say, we got to do a better job. He's going to say it's a 60-minute, all the old cliches. He wants to be Parcells or Belichick. He wants to be Belichick, who learned from Parcells. But the one thing they asked him about, and I had hoped he would actually say, is explain the timeout. Explain the timeout. What happened on the timeout? Because I don't generally believe there is a single play in a game, or a single player in a game, or a single moment in a game that causes them to win or lose. And in case I haven't mentioned it, I don't care what they say. Today was a loss. What happens on a play like that, where in the replay on television, you see Darrell Bevell give the timeout signal? My understanding is that an OC or actually no one else on the sideline can legally, for lack of a better term, call a timeout except the head coach. So I think, as I sit here 90 minutes after the game, I may read things later or tomorrow, or we may get an explanation at the press conference tomorrow, and oh my God, if he says this same stupid stuff at the press conference, I can do nothing. I was going to say, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do nothing because he's going to say exactly the same thing. He doesn't answer it. He says something to the effect of trying to make sure we had a good play and the clock was running down. But, and I was going to save this for the Stafford segment, the greatness of TV, they caught it. Stafford was furious. And people will complain that he doesn't have fire. He's a dude, and he doesn't care. That guy cares. That guy has fire. This is not me trying to back Stafford. I am unapologetically a Stafford guy. I have said it. I'll say it probably every podcast. I carved out a specific segment of this show just for Matt Stafford. I am unapologetically a Stafford guy, and I will debate a reasonable person about whether or not Matt Stafford is the reason they win or lose games. And one of the things in the podcast is we want to talk about, I want to get to why I think they lost the game. It'll never be one guy. It'll never be one reason. But I'm going to say this. My guess is that there will be 2 or 3 games during the year where it may appear that it was Stafford, but it wasn't. There will be a couple of games where he will probably play us out and actually be one of the top 3 reasons. But if you go over his career and you take the percentage of games that Matt Stafford's performance was one of the top 3 reasons they lost the game, and you take their wins and evaluate whether Matt Stafford's performance was one of the top 3 reasons they won the game, the second number is going to be significantly higher than the first. That's my Stafford thing. On the sideline, though, they caught him. And his exact words were, trust me. Trust me. That's a leader. That's him. He didn't go Terrell Owens or Dez or Antonio to the OC and yell it to his face, which is probably a sign of maturity, but that emotion came out of him. He knew he had the play call, and they ultimately snapped the ball and got a wide open, I think it was McKissick in the flat, would have picked up 15, 20 yards, who knows. Game-changing type of play. One of a handful of plays that could have changed the game. But they called a timeout. And in his mind, they didn't trust him to get the playoff. And that passion that I saw from him was, I know my job. I know how to do my job. Trust me. So when he comes into the press conference, back to Matt Patricia, and says, we were trying to make sure we had a good play. Sometimes blah, blah, blah is going to be me translating for you. Translating nonsense speak, which is what Patricia will always speak. A lot of the players will speak. And even Stafford will sometimes speak. We didn't trust that Stafford was going to get the playoff in time. And Stafford's reaction was, yes, I was. You got to trust me. And he's been doing this for 9 years. He's done it well at times. He's done it not so well at others. But his point is extremely valid, and it might be the sign of a new OC who's not really comfortable, doesn't really know his quarterback yet, is trust me. And given the choice of 3 people, who do I trust? Matt Patricia, Matt Stafford, or Darrell Bevell? I'm taking number 9. Agree with me or not, I'm taking number 9. And I think that play was huge. One of 3, 4 huge plays in the game. And for Patricia to come to the post game and just say, we got to do a better job coaching. We were trying to make sure we had a good play. That's nonsense. He's got to be better than that. He's got to be better than that. He won't. I'm not crazy. He won't. But he should be. He should be. And I'm going to just segue right into my favorite time of the podcast, right? We get to spend time talking about everybody's favorite quarterback. This segment is just called Stafford. Now, Now, what I would normally do here is give this big, huge overview, and I'm not. I'm going to give you his numbers simply: 27 of 45, 385 and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He completed passes to 8 receivers. So simple, clean. Matthew Stafford was not the reason for this loss. I know it was a tie, but I'm going to keep calling it a loss. His fire after that timeout fiasco in the real world doesn't matter because it's still a tie/loss. But I liked seeing it. That made me like him and appreciate him more because he feels confident that he has this. And basically, it should, in a perfect world, strengthen the relationship between he and the OC and he and the head coach. Because at that point, Matt Patricia had a choice. Trust Matthew Stafford or trust Darrell Bevell, and he chose Bevell. I think it was the wrong choice. Stafford played an efficient game, right? He eye test, he looked good. There were a couple passes that were behind. Hockenson bailed him out on one. I think Galladay bailed him out on one. A couple of bad throws. But he looked in command. He actually just looked like he moved better, right? I think they'll never admit it. He'll never admit it. We'll never find evidence. His back was injured last year. And that's not an excuse. It's actually just a reason for what was very bad performance in 4 or 5 games. It's clear he was injured last year. He was moved on the touchdown pass to Amendola. He slipped a potential sack, stepped up. The whole RPO, the run pass option play where he kept the ball and scampered might be a polite word for like 12 yards. But he looks healthier, like strictly from a movement in the pocket, and his feet look quicker. And we all remember the early days of Fat Stafford, right? He looks nimble, and he played a good game, right? My biggest thing is I don't care about the completion percentage. I think it's an overrated stat that can be very deceptive. Guys can dink and dunk and pad their stats that way. Overall, today I like distribution, that he completed passes to 8 receivers. Clearly the tight end is a part of this offense. The position in general. I think Hockenson had 7 catches and maybe Jesse James had 2. But clearly the tight end targets even more, right? So I think the tight end is a critical part of this offense. Stafford used everybody. That's my point. I think touchdown to interception ratio is the stat. That's the stat I care about. That's the stat that I think translates directly to wins and losses. Today, 3 touchdowns, no picks, right? He's not going to do this every week. I think, though, that when it's all said and done, if his ratio is 3-1 or better, they go to the playoffs. If he has 30 touchdowns and 10 picks, they go to the playoffs. If he has 27 and 9, I think they go to the playoffs. Touchdown to interception, to me, is a statistic that directly impacts wins and losses, right? Interceptions, kill drives, oftentimes give the other team points. Touchdowns are obviously points. More importantly, touchdowns are not field goals, which they've struggled with quite a bit in the red zone, get in the end zone instead of Prater doing what Prater does. And I'm not going to mention him much because he's just money. I could do a segment on Matt Prater every week and it would just all be glowing praise. Matt Prater is money. But touchdown interception for Stafford, I'm probably going to talk about that every week. I'm going to talk about distribution. If he's completing passes to 8 receivers every week, the offense will not be the problem. They will not. So I think the most important thing Stafford did was the outburst. And I'm not one who believes, showing passion and emotion or anger is disruptive to a team. No. I think the coaches need to go into their rooms and look over the film. They need to see him pissed when he went to the sideline after that play. They need to read his lips and see him say, trust me. And they need to know he did it in a mature way in that he didn't get in our face. He walked away. He let the passion out. And hopefully someone asks Patricia about it at the Monday press conference. He won't answer because, we just spent 10 minutes talking about that. He won't say anything. But from a Stafford standpoint, Stafford's not the reason for this loss/tie. I think he played well enough for them to win the football game within the parameters of the offense. So my basic view of Stafford, and I hope this is my Stafford view on every podcast. He did enough at his position for the team to win games. He absolutely was not the reason for the loss, and he did enough for them to win. He actually played well, in my opinion. Now let's talk about highs and lows. Highs and lows are two parts, right? There's highlights and lowlights, individual players, and then there's a handful of plays every game that make such an impact that you can't ignore them. So we're gonna do a little bit of both, right? So highs and lows today from a player standpoint. I'm gonna go with both teams. I'm gonna talk about both teams. Quietly, we missed Jarrett Davis. He was inactive today with a bad ankle that he hurt. I'm gonna say in the Buffalo game, preseason game. We missed Jarrett Davis. David Johnson gashed us on some big plays, and Jarrett Davis has matured into a really good linebacker. And I think working with Jelani Tavai, they will work well together. I think Tavai will be better when Jarrett Davis is in the lineup. Although he played well today. So we missed Jarrett Davis from a low light. I would have liked to have seen the run defense with JD in the lineup. On a performance negative, Taylor Decker had a bad game. I think he's basically a good player. He had a bad game, and it's tough to just say it that way and leave it that way. The reality is, Chandler Jones is a really good player, and Terrell Suggs, T-Sizzle, he is old but he's still good, and they gave him the business today. Taylor Decker, I think, had a false start, 2 holdings, and he got beat clean minimum 3 times. Taylor Decker is one of those days where he doesn't want to go to work Tuesday and watch the film. If I was him, I'd call in sick. I don't want to see that film because he got the business from both of those guys all day. The other guy, and I don't know if it was subtly or quietly, Jamal Agnew. Jamal Agnew's performance had a direct correlation to the loss. And if you jumped into the podcast in the middle, I know it was a tie, but I feel like it was a loss. Jamal Agnew muffed a punt that was critical. Doesn't feel critical because it was in the second quarter. I think it was 10-0 at the time. Maybe they got a field goal, made it 10-3. Not the point. It was at a time when, at the risk of sounding too graphic, you're in that area where you're almost ready to put your foot on their necks. And I think if you take that and you go down, or actually maybe the defense stopped them from scoring after that. I could be wrong. But if you go down, you take that possession, he doesn't muff the punt, you go down, you go up 17-0. I don't know. I think it's foot on the neck time. It's difficult. And beside just that bad muff, he had no impact on the return game. I didn't even bother looking up his total net return yards. I'm going to guess it was 30 yards maybe on 6 or 7 returns. He sucked on the return game. He didn't go to the hole correctly. He was picking the wrong direction to run. And then when he was in playing corner, he got beat on 3 critical plays. 2 big first downs and another big critical play. He didn't play well. Those 2 guys, Taylor Decker and Jamal Agnew, I don't do the point out a guy. But this segment is highs and lows. Their performances today were lows. They were really ugly lows. Now, there were highs. On the opposite side of the field, Larry Fitzgerald. Seriously? Larry Fitzgerald just make plays. By all accounts, he's a great dude, but he just catches the football. He runs good routes. He made 3 catches probably. Just catches that everybody doesn't make. He had 8 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown. And he's, 67, 68 years old. I don't know how old he is, really. But Larry Fitzgerald had a fantastic game. Larry Fitzgerald was absolutely a massive input into the Cardinals getting this tie. Right? And the other guy's David Johnson. Fantasy guys will know it didn't feel like David Johnson dominated the game. But he had 82 yards on 18 carries, caught 6 passes for another 55 yards and a touchdown. David Johnson impacted this game in every way. Big runs, massive touchdown catch. David Johnson is quietly a really, really good player. Fantasy people know it. He gets drafted high in fantasy leagues. I think the guy is grossly underrated by everyone not in a fantasy football league. David Johnson's really, really good. Now, on the plus side for the Lions, I personally, and I think maybe a lot of Lions fans, we've underrated Devon Kennard. This guy makes plays. I think he had 3 sacks today, 3 sacks, and he had pressures and hurries. Now, within their scheme, that sort of outside backer is kind of the left end. They play kind of a hybrid, but he is rushing the passer quite a bit. And at the end of the day, the stat for pass rushers is sacks. Sacks and hurries. And I know he got to the quarterback twice where he did make a sack, and I think he recorded 3 official sacks. Devon Kennard had a really good game, and I was glad to see it. I think he has been good literally from the day he put on our uniform. I think he's a scheme fit, and he just makes plays. And the other one, and my brother's going to love this because he's a hater, Darius Slay had a phenomenal game. You know why? Because they never talked about him. So one of 2 things was happening. They didn't throw his way, which I want to say, I remember 3 plays, right? I remember 1 catch where he made a tackle immediately, and I remember him breaking up 2 plays. You didn't see Slay or hear about Slay that much. Not because he wasn't on the field, but the exact opposite. You don't throw to Darius Slay. Other people know it. Lions fans don't really realize it. I think he's been to 2 Pro Bowls already. Darius Slay is one of the 3 or 4 best corners in all of football. And he makes plays. And he changes the game. They don't throw to him. They just don't throw to him. And I can't remember him getting beat. I don't remember a big play where 23 was in the frame. It was quiet. At one point I thought, is Darius Slay even playing? That just means he's doing his job. Because there's certain guys, referees, should be others, where they're doing their jobs when you're not talking about them. And either they didn't throw to him, which I don't blame them, or he just made plays. And he's been doing that, by the way, for like 5 years now. Darius Slay had a really good game. Now, I didn't leave out the obvious. I'm going to get to him in a minute. But I thought Kennard and Slay played very well. Plays that impacted the game, right? There's a lot, right? I told you it's hard to just pinpoint 1 or 2. But I did 3. And one I mentioned, Agnew muffing that punt, I thought was a momentum-killing critical play. That building was quiet. I was hearing chants of "Let's go Lions." The game was in Arizona, but I heard chants of "Let's go Lions." We were in that place in the game where you can just snatch it right out of them and it's over, and then you kind of continue to do your business and handle this the way this should have been. This should have been a business trip. Go out there, take care of business, come home, right? And through basically 3 quarters it was. That muff took away an opportunity to build on the momentum. It didn't kill it, but it took away an opportunity to build on it. I think from the obvious perspective, the David Johnson touchdown was massive. And on that play, Jalen Reeves-Maybin was in the right position. He had good coverage. When he went to turn to locate the ball, he fell. Subtle, little, feels like tiny thing. If he stays on his feet and gets turned around, he probably knocks that ball down. They may or may not score a touchdown on that drive, and all this is moot, right? That's the snowball finding the downhill slope. And when he falls down and David Johnson catches the ball, the snowball tilted over and started rolling downhill. And that was that. And I knew it. I've been a Lions fan for over 40 years. I knew it. it wasn't hard to figure out. It's still painful to watch, and you still have the cornbread Kool-Aid right in front of you, and you want to believe, nah, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Come on, it's 24. At that point, it was 24-9. The touchdown took it to 24-16. And you know, something in your mind says, this is a one-score football game. We're early in the fourth. This is a one-score football game. And you know, right? Because we're Lions fans. We know. And those of you who are listening who are not Lions fans, we know. We knew. You're never allowed to be comfortable. At 24-6, and I want to say it was into the fourth quarter. They might have gotten that third field goal late in the third. I don't recall. But at 24-6, I wasn't comfortable. No, I wasn't comfortable. That's crazy. We don't have the luxury of doing that. So when Jalen Reeves-Maybin fell and David Johnson caught that touchdown pass, I knew. I knew. So then the final play, to me, which there's a bunch of others. I could talk about Amendola not running out of bounds in overtime. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? You know we have screwed away all of our... Get out of bounds. What are you doing? I don't know. But it's the timeout. It's the time. That play was critical. That was... I called Agnew's fumble a momentum killer in terms of stopping us from building momentum. The idiotic timeout, that idiotic timeout, because there were others, that particular idiotic timeout really shut it down. That was the Lion-esque move. That was Marty Morningwig taking the wind in overtime. That was Jim Schwartz throwing a challenge flag on Thanksgiving against Houston when you can't. On a play you can't. That was that. What are we doing? Wait, what? What are we doing? And that's when you know, right? When that happens, you start to see it. Because with the Lions, it doesn't happen. Well, sometimes it happens. The picked up flag in Dallas, the Calvin Johnson process. Sometimes it happens just in a gut punch, right? But most of the time, it happens progressively. You see it. You see it coming. You're like, oh, okay. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. And as these things started to happen, didn't love the Agnew fumble, but it was in the second quarter. The Johnson touchdown was like, okay. The timeout was like, oh, we're going to do that. And then you just watch it. You just watch it. Fitzgerald makes the diving catch. Of course he did. Of course Kyler Murray made a great throw. What are we talking about? Of course. Of course. So you see it happen. You know it's going to happen. You hope it doesn't. But you just watch it. As it does, and the life slowly drains out of your body. Those are my impact plays, right? Direct outcome of the game impacting plays. It's the Agnew fumble in the second. Shut down great momentum. The David Johnson touchdown was the snowball beginning to roll downhill. And that idiotic timeout, I don't even know. It's just why? Why? I don't all I can say is why. It makes no sense. So in every game, Mike and I, as we discuss this, how do we want to format this? We're like, you know what? Mike says in every game, there's always like a guy, one or two where you're like, it's a guy, right? He deserves to be talked about specifically, separate, good or bad, or good and bad, because usually I'm not going to settle on one. But we wanted to say, now here's a guy that we have to talk about. He deserves his own time in the podcast. And I'm going to try and limit it to one, but more likely there's going to be one good and one bad. And I'm going to totally deviate from the rules and end up naming 5 guys, even though this segment is called, now here's a guy. So the guy is TJ, right? It's TJ Hawkinson. And going forward, I'm just going to call him Hawk because I think it sounds cool, right? You got to give this dude a nickname. He comes out in his first pro game, 6 catches, 131 yards, and a touchdown, and was dominant. TJ Hawkinson, in as much as someone dominated offensively for the Lions, the guy is almost uncoverable, right? He seems to just get open. So at the risk of being that Lion fan that wants to get him a yellow jacket right now, I'm not going to do that. I didn't love the pick in April, but I warmed up to the pick, and it doesn't take much. And this might not be unique to Lions. It doesn't take much for me. Like I said, I'm not fitting the guy for a yellow jacket, but I think you can see that they scheme for this guy. They scheme specifically for the tight end position, and he seems to have everything you want in a tight end. He runs great routes. The touchdown was just, I'm bigger than you, I'm better than you. And he went up and got it. Right, that was reminiscent of Stafford throwing one up for Calvin, and Calvin out jumping like 3, I want to say, Cowboys in a game against Dallas. If Hawkinson can make this kind of impact, and I don't expect him to go 6 for 131 and a touchdown every week, but I expect him to take up time in the meeting room of the Chargers on Wednesday. Here's the guy, right? They're literally going to say, now, here's the guy. Here's the guy we have to account for. Here's the guy we have to know where he is. We have to game plan for this guy. Now, we haven't had a guy that other teams have had to game plan for since Calvin left. And prior to that, probably back to Barry. Having that guy at the tight end position is crazy. I think that he can make a difference in the offense. And the numbers, like total yardage, look good. They put up 3 touchdowns. So today, this being a reaction podcast to a game that ended about 2 hours ago, the offense doesn't worry me from a player execution. I've told you how I feel about Stafford. They didn't run the ball well, but I'm about to get to that. Hawkinson brings something different. Marvin showed up late and made some big catches. Galladay, Amendola had 7 catches. I like what I see from the distribution of passes to receivers. 385 yards and 3 touchdowns is a good day by any measure. But TJ Hawkinson looks like the real deal. It's one data point. I get that. But, cornbread and Kool-Aid dictates that I got to fall in love with this guy fast. So I'm just going to say Hawk's my guy. I drafted him in the fantasy league for a reason. And today, he made plays. I feel like he might have had a drop. But he made plays. He made plays today that should have led to a win. So here's a guy. Is 3 guys. And it ain't good. These three guys are Matt Patricia, Darrell Bevell, and Paul Pasqualoni. All 3 coaches. And I got to be nice because people I care about might listen to this podcast. But I should just apologize to them and say what I want to say. They sucked. They all sucked. They didn't just suck kinda, right? They sucked badly. I'm going to go one by one. Start with Darrell Bevell. I wanted to love this guy midway through the third quarter. We had 24 points. We had some effective drives. We had some creative schemes. We had plays that had Stafford running and wide open tight ends. I wanted to go, okay. But this guy works for the Lions, so you don't have the luxury of doing that. And then up 24-6, I believe, they went into whatever you would call a prevent offense. The running game was not effective today. I don't, because I'm not a journalist, I'm not a broadcaster, I don't need to be accurate in this podcast. It's more about how I feel. I feel like Kerryon had, 40 to 50 yards rushing. Maybe CJ tacked on another 20, 25. My guess is they had something between 120 and 140 total rushing yards. Not good enough. For the number of times you ran the football, not good enough. For a game for a game where you led 24-6. Not good enough. Not good enough. The run game was not effective. And some of that falls on most of that falls on Bevel. You know why? Because the runs were weak. They were dive plays into the middle of the line. A line that is not horrible. Despite missing both of their top corners, their line didn't suck that much. And they ran unimaginative, non-creative running plays that were 2 yards, 3 yards. Kerryon and CJ made a couple of those plays work because he sent them right into the middle of the line. And there will be some stupid discussion about balance and keeping the other team honest and men in the box and literal that should have been blah, blah, blah segment. Darrell Bevell sucked today. I'm sorry. Despite everything that happened in the first 2.5, almost 3 quarters, which is really good, the truth is Amendola's touchdown was busted coverage. Hawkinson's touchdown was a 50-50 jump ball. Galladay, busted coverage. He was blocking, slipped out, nobody picked him up. The 3 touchdowns were Arizona mistakes. That's true. I want to say the guy was great. Now, kudos to Stafford for making the throws, for avoiding the rush. Kudos to the guys for making the catches and getting into the end zone. Scheme-wise, all 3 of those touchdowns came on Arizona busted coverage. Bevel gets 0 credit for any of those. 0. Less than 0. If I could go less than 0. At 1 to 10 scale, Bevel was a negative today. I am, as much as I fell in love with TJ Hawkinson for one game, I am seriously concerned about our offensive coordinator. And he knows more about calling plays than I will, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about any of that. None of that matters. He sucked today. And when they were up 24-6, he got conservative. He got complacent. He took his foot off the gas, and he allowed Arizona to get back into it. And I am not a violent person by nature, but you put your foot on their necks and you stomp them out. You stomp them out. You run up the score. I don't care. I don't care. You're the Lions. You don't have the luxury of not running up the score. I'm gonna give my friend Chris a shout out right here because I will reference this story. So I have to give full context. Chris lives in Michigan, goes to Lions games in his Packer gear, born in Wisconsin. Packer fan his whole life. He will consciously rile Lions fans, for lack of a better term, but he'll be there in his Packer jersey, and people will give him looks. And I've been with him, right? They'll give him looks, they'll say stuff. And he's got this joke. It ain't that funny, but it's so true. He will say to them in Ford Field, hey, can you give me directions to the trophy room, right? And these Lions fans give him this quizzical look like, what's he? He's like, the trophy room. At Lambeau, they have a room where we keep our Super Bowl trophies. And that moment when the fan gets what he's saying and they want to choke him out, they want to throw a beer at him, but they realize we don't have a trophy room. We don't have a trophy room. And until you get a trophy room, when you're up 24-6, you stomp them out. You don't get conservative. You don't take your foot off the gas. You don't run dive play. You don't have a trophy room. You don't have a trophy room. You don't get to do that. Because you know what happens? You get a tie. That's what happens. Teams with trophy rooms don't blow 24-6 fourth quarter leads. That's truth. You don't have a trophy room. Run up the score. So whatever Darrell Bevell was thinking, and maybe because he won a Super Bowl in Seattle, he's thinking we have a trophy room here. Maybe he's confused, and he doesn't realize we don't have a trophy room. You put your foot on their necks. You stomp them out. You get up 30, and you put in your backup quarterback. That's what you do. 24-6 is, by every sense of math, and I'm really good at math, a 2-score game. You run up the score. Because a 2-score game, and Arizona didn't do anything great. They didn't. I'm going to get to that. They didn't do anything great. You took your foot off the gas. You started running dive plays. You got conservative. And you watched that game and you saw it. You know what happened. You saw it. I watched every play of that game. You got conservative. You took your foot off the gas. You let them back in. On offense, by not running up the score, by not putting your foot on their necks. Because you come into the press conference Monday and they say, hey, do you feel bad about running up the score? Why didn't you just relax and put in the backups? You get as close as you can to the microphone like I'm doing right now and say, guys, we don't have a trophy room. That's it. That's it. It's that simple. That's what you say. On defense, no better. Up 24-6, they went into some soft coverage as close to a prevent as I've ever seen in 15 years, and they started letting them get these short little passes, and you know what happened? Kyler Murray got comfortable. The crowd decided to start watching the game again. And they started completing passes, and they started getting a rhythm. Next thing you know, he chucks one up. Jalen Reeves-Maybin falls, and David Johnson's in the end zone, and it's a one-score football game. And now that snowball is rolling down the hill. And you can't do anything about it. Why? Because you don't have a trophy room and you don't know what you're supposed to do. If that game is where it should be, 31, 38-6, which it should have been. It should have been. That game should have been out of reach by the fourth quarter. That game should have been a joke in the fourth quarter. I should have been doing laundry, not even paying attention in the fourth quarter. But you took your foot off their necks. You got into a prevent. You let them get rhythm. Rhythm equals momentum. Momentum equals crowd. Kyler Murray's got confidence. This is working. We can do anything. Guys are falling. Larry Fitzgerald is making circus catches. You let him back in. You had him, and you let him back in. And the late Dennis Green said it. You had him where you wanted him, and you let him back in. You did. You did. And that's the tough watch, because that's all coaching. That's why I'm not blaming players. I talked a little bit about Agnew. Decker didn't play well. They're not the reason, because despite that, you're up 24-6 in the fourth quarter, and you're running dive plays. What are you doing? Put your foot on their neck. We don't have the luxury, ever, of doing that. If you're up 30, you can run dive. If you're up 30 in the fourth quarter, you can run dive plays. 2-score game, you can't get conservative on offense and conservative on defense? What are you talking about? And at the end of the day, Matt Patricia, you're accountable for all of it. And most importantly, you called the timeout. You chose to trust your OC and not your quarterback, and you called the timeout. All three of them sucked. They like to do the grades in the newspapers. Offensive coach, E. Head coach, F. Defensive coach, E. You guys suck, all of you. No single player, no single play, no single person outside of those three guys is more responsible for this loss. And it is a loss. Do not hit the Twitter at CityRoar. Do not shoot me an email, roarmotorcity@gmail.com, and say, a tie is okay, it's not really a lot. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. The coaches suck today. And that's the most discouraging thing, because my quarterback, and I called him my quarterback because I am a Stafford guy, my quarterback looked good. My first round tight end looked really good. Even Amendola, Marvin made big catches. Offensively, they look good. They look good. The defensive line, for the most part, until Pasqualoni called them off, only up 18, 17, called them off, looked good. Kennard had 3 sacks. They were holding themselves up well. David Johnson's really good. He did his thing. The defense was playing well, doing that. When they got close, they bent, but they didn't break. Every time Arizona early was in the red zone, they tightened up. They made plays. They did. Later, he called them off. You changed their mentality. They went from being hungry dogs trying to stomp somebody out to relaxing and trying to protect the lead. Anybody who watched that game can see that. Anybody who watched that game can see that. And I didn't even mention penalties and mental errors. It's just crazy. Tracy Walker almost cost them the game in overtime with a late hit out of bounds. What the hell are you thinking? What are you doing? That's coaching. That's bad coaching. Stafford, why is Stafford throwing that pass? If the guy catches the interception, they kick a field goal and they legitimately lose the game. That's a bad play call. You're not getting it done there. That's a bad play call. Sorry. You're not going to chuck up some Hail Mary from your own 30. It's not going to happen. And you can blame Stafford for the throw. That's fine. He's trying to make a play. Too late. Coaches already blew the game. You're not making a play now. It's too late. So the coaches, so here's a guy, good thing, obvious, TJ Hockenson, great game. Could have been Stafford, more TJ. On the bad side, it's all three coaches together. Now, I'm not the guy who's like, oh, fire everybody. No, you can't fire them. You can't. That would be easy. That would be great. Can't do it. We're stuck with this guy. We are. And he's going to come to his press conference tomorrow and try and sound like the smartest guy in the room and say a bunch of nonsense that means nothing. The coaches lost the game today. This is a coaching loss. If you are one of those people who needs to blame someone, just one person so you can rail, it's the coaching staff. And if you want to go really, really narrow, it's Matt Patricia. This is a Matt Patricia loss. And later in the season, the beauty of the podcast is that it's recorded. So in 15, 16, 17 weeks, I'm going to say, remember my first podcast? Actually, the second one, but the first regular season game? The tie loss? Remember the tie loss? Because I will remember the tie loss. The tie loss was a coaching loss. The coaches cost us this. There's nothing good that comes out of this. There are people, and I promise you, am positive. I'm borderline myopic. I struggle to find the negative when it comes to this football team. I have said many, many times, I will explain cornbread and Kool-Aid again. I drink the blue Kool-Aid for a living. It's my favorite drink. When it's close to football season or when it's on a Sunday morning, the cornbread is piping out. I'm ready to gobble up some Lions cornbread. Cornbread and Kool-Aid is literally my favorite meal. Today, I mean, it's my first podcast, man. This is like the first real one, and you do this. You do this. I blame the coaches. I really do. Simple. All right. There's your guy. Now we move on to the time in the podcast where Mike drills me, mocks me, challenges me. Supposed to be 3 hard-hitting questions about the game today. And because in general, it's going to feel like 2 bad Darrell Bevel dives up the middle and an incomplete pass, then a punt, we decided to give it a name. And the name we gave it is 3 and Out. So today's 3 and Out is painful.
So Demetrius, you might remember when we started preparing for this thing, we went through the whole season. I think we projected the Lions at like 9-7, maybe fighting for a wild card spot. You know, a little ambitious, but who knows? And obviously, I don't think when you project any team's record in the NFL that you prepare for a tie. It's so uneventful, unsatisfying, I guess would be the proper descriptors. You know, we just want to like pretend that they don't exist to a degree. So in your ever so eloquent way, Demetrius, break it down for us.
Yeah.
Why did this game end up in a tie?
Yeah, so the reason the game ended up in a tie is simple. The coaches suck. No, the coaches, wow, I want to say overthought, but I don't know that that's what it is. I think that I have to assume that the perspective that the coaches have from the sideline is different than what we see. But I have to believe that everybody, people watching at home in Michigan, or if you're in the crowd in Arizona, wherever you are, you still have a feel for what's happening in the football game. You still have the ability to see a game and watch a few plays if you didn't know the score at all and say, wait, which one of these teams do I think is the better team? Which one of these teams do I think is controlling the game? Who's winning? Who's better? You should be able to feel that, right? And so when you do that, when that takes place, and you decide the score is 24-6. By all appearances, statistical, score, quietness of the crowd, through 3 quarters, it would have been a really reasonable thought that the Lions are the better team. The Lions are going to win this game. ESPN's got this percentage thing. And real time as the game's going on, they do this whole percentage of chance to win, right down to the last play. Right? So my assumption is that thing favored the Lions for 58 and a half minutes. And if that's the case, how do you end up with a tie loss? It's bad decisions, right? I don't think player performance is the reason. I think you have to, at some point in time, say to yourself, what was the moment? What was the play? What was the change philosophically that ultimately led to the game ending the way it did? And so your question is, why did this game end up as a tie? Or as I'm calling it, a tie loss? The coaches philosophically changed the way they called the game on offense and defense, roughly the same time. Because of that, Arizona was able to gain confidence through making simple plays and build momentum. I don't know how much the crowd matters, but the crowd certainly got into it. And that ultimately led to the snowball effect.
Yeah, I buy that. The defense looked a little worn down by the end, so not to keep bringing up my Bears to you, but last year, game 1 against the Packers, they just looked worn down. They looked beaten up. Rodgers made a miraculous comeback in the fourth quarter, and it just kind of, if I were to take something away from the Lions game this weekend, that's probably what I would say. I know, like you said, people have their different opinions on, if they were calling the game differently, calling the rest of the game, trying to play it conservative, and that very much looked like the case too. So, but I also want to circle back around to your favorite play of the game. Let's talk again about the timeout play. So what the heck happened there?
So from my vantage point, initially, it looked like Bevel called a timeout. I subsequently learned that offense coordinators can't call timeouts. The only person on the sideline that can call a timeout is the head coach. So what I've been able to figure out, again, 2 hours after the game, is that the clock was running low. The play clock was low. And Bevel signals to Patricia, call a timeout. I didn't see it. It wasn't in the TV frame. But I assume, because the officials granted the timeout, that after Bevel signaled to him to call a timeout, Patricia called the timeout. Why? Why? The why, and I'm basing this 100% on my ability to read Matthew Stafford's lips. They didn't trust him, right? They didn't think Stafford was going to get the playoff. And that whole philosophy in a game is something that I haven't really thought a lot about. It's like, as the head coach, who is the person who should be responsible for managing the play clock, right? The idea of getting the playoff or knowing that the play clock is so low you're not going to get the playoff that you should use a timeout. Historically, that has been the quarterback. In the last 8 years, it has almost exclusively been a quarterback. I will tell you, in all honesty, I can't remember a time when the timeout came from the sideline because of the play clock. That's what the quarterback does. Or he takes the delay, he takes the blame, he takes the accountability for the delay of game. If he being Matt Patricia, comes to the press conference tomorrow and says they called the timeout because the play clock was low. My hope is that someone follows that up and says, why wouldn't you let Stafford do that? Why is that not Matt Stafford's job? Why did you not trust that Stafford would recognize the play clock was low and either get the play off, which he did, or he would call the timeout? At what point did that become a sideline responsibility, a head coach responsibility, or an OC responsibility? I don't know that I have ever thought of that process as being one that is owned by the head coach or the offensive coordinator. It has always felt to me like that is the quarterback's job. That is the quarterback's responsibility. And I'm going to guess, based on my ability to read lips, that Matthew Stafford believes that that's the quarterback's job. And I tend to fall on his side of this. So what happened was Bevel, either because he hasn't built the relationship with Stafford that he needs, because he doesn't trust Stafford, which is what Matthew Stafford believes, or he, historically in his other offensive coordinator positions, has controlled that situation, has dictated that situation, has been the one who has managed the clock, which I just think that's nonsense, by the way. Stafford's on the field. That's a part of the rhythm of the game. That's a part of understanding where your teammates are lined up, looking over the defense. You glance up at the clock. That's a quarterback decision. That's a quarterback decision. So going very, very deep, if this is going to be some control thing where Bevel is a control freak and is trying to do that from the sidelines, that's got to be addressed quick, fast, and in a hurry. Right now. How are we doing this? Because, again, based on my incredible lip reading skills, Matthew Stafford felt like they didn't trust him. And they need to address that right now. That cannot fester. That cannot continue. That cannot go unaddressed. It has to be addressed. Because my feeling, and Stafford's too, that's his job. Let him do his job. So that's what I think happened. Darrell Bevel didn't trust Matthew Stafford. Matt Patricia didn't trust Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford knows they didn't trust him, and Matthew Stafford is not happy about it.
So, with all that said, I don't know if it's possible to have a neutral outlook on the rest of the season after one game, but on the bright side, you're still a super fan of the undefeated Detroit Lions. So there you go. What do you take away from this? Where do we go for the rest of the year?
Well, for the rest of the season, it's tough. We wanted to be a reaction podcast. I'm still hot about the game two and a half hours ago. And anything I project now is going to be negative because, I'm a Lions fan. So what I take away is not all bad. So I take away that Matthew Stafford's healthy. If you believe he had a back injury or not last year, I don't know. After today, I tend to believe he did. He looked different. TJ Hawkinson is real. He's legit. Darrell Bevel has to get better. So as much as it was blah, 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 the statement Matt Patricia made post-game of, we got to do a better job coaching, nothing has been more accurate than that. Yes, you have to do a better job coaching. I didn't like his run philosophy. I didn't like his run play calling. I don't like his scheme from a run standpoint, right? I didn't think the running game was meaningful or effective today. And I blame Bevel because what they did get was almost exclusively a matter of Kerryon and CJ making plays, Stafford scrambling. Darrell Bevel's supposed to be run guru, right? And I know it feels like, I feel like I've been bashing Darrell Bevel for a half hour, but I don't see any reason to stop. He is supposed to be a guy whose forte is the run. So to directly answer your question, if we don't run the ball better, it's going to be a long season. If he doesn't trust Matthew Stafford, you're going to lose Matthew Stafford. You lose Matthew Stafford, it's going to be a long season. If they don't develop the mindset that we don't have a trophy room, there will be other games like this. When they get beat by teams that are better, and that's going to happen, it'll be a different podcast. I will take a different tone. I might still be pissed. I will certainly be disappointed. I will understand why. Because they're going to get beat this year. Now, getting beat is the other team's better. Or the other team is almost as good as you, equally as good as you, and they made plays. Because they're professional football players too. Other teams are good. When you get beat, the podcast will sound one way. When you lose, even if you lose because Stafford has a bad day, I won't love that. I'll come on, I'll honestly bash him. Or evaluate it. It's not about bashing. Somebody fumbles a key play or a lot of penalties. Player execution will be a reason that they lose some games. That'll be tough, but I'll deal with that. That'll be tough. When you play a team and you're better and you outplay them for a period of time and you make a philosophical change in how you decide to play, you have essentially taken the ability to control whether or not you win or lose the game out of the hands of the players. That is unacceptable. That is inexcusable. And that's what happened today. The coaches took from the players the ability to control their own fate. And I don't know a single player on that roster. I guess there's 53 of them on the active roster. I know one, number 9, and probably others who are feeling right now, 3 hours after the game, like, we should have won. We are better. We played better for most of the game. The coaches literally took away their ability to win the game. And shame on the coaching staff. So the answer to your question is, when Matt Patricia says we got to do a better job coaching, I hope he explains. I hope he goes deeper. He won't. He's a coach. He specifically is a coach from the Belichick tree. He is not going to say what I just said, which is essentially, we lost that game as coaches, all 3 of us, together. We all made bad decisions. We all did things that cost us the game. And we have to trust, as Matthew Stafford made very clear, trust our players. Trust that my quarterback knows when to call a timeout. Trust my players. Trust them and put them in a position to go out and win the game, because that's the job of the coaches. During the week, it is game planning, it is scheming, all that stuff's great. It is developing a game plan that if the players go out and execute, it will lead to success. They did that. And then in the middle of the game, just after the middle of the game, they completely deviated from it. And I have no explanation why. I wish I could tell you why that makes sense. But if I play a certain way for 3 quarters and I'm up 24-6, I'm putting my foot on your neck. I don't have a trophy room. I got to stomp you out. So if I beat you 41-6, I'm not apologizing. Herman Edwards, you play to win the game. That's it. You don't play to not blow somebody out. You don't play to just kind of win. Don't upset anyone. No. If I beat you 41-6, it means I'm better or I worked harder. And you need to go get better or work harder. Doesn't mean I'm not a nice guy. Doesn't mean we're not a nice team. Because if you're up 24-6 and you do that nonsense, compassion is for other areas. Not being a coach in Detroit. We don't have time for that. Why? I'll say it again. We don't have a trophy room. Till we get a trophy room, we don't get the luxury of taking our foot off your neck. We don't. If that's going to happen, if they're not going to trust the players, if they're going to outthink themselves as coaches, if they're going to do this nonsense of mid-game deviating from what got us to 24-6, it's going to be a long season. So my takeaway is the coaches are our biggest problem. I feel like the quarterback's solid. I feel like we're good at tight end. We got a solid defensive line. We got an all-pro corner. I think the running backs will play better if they're allowed to. If the schemes are right. If the coaches don't change the game plan in the middle of the game. Today was a coaching loss. Today was a 100% coaching loss. Doesn't mean passes weren't dropped, punts weren't muffed, tackles weren't missed. Sure. Today, the tie loss is on the shoulder of the coaches. I say all three. It's really Matt Patricia. But he feels untouchable. He won't address it. He won't own it. He'll give lame coach speak at the press conference tomorrow, and hopefully someone calls him on it. I don't know if they will. But today's tie loss was on the coaches. And I hope we don't talk about this the rest of the season. I hope I never bring this up again. That is highly doubtful. Highly doubtful. So what's next? Next week, we have the LA Chargers in town. Now, here's the thing. They do not have a rookie quarterback. They do not have a first-year coach. They are a really good football team. And this is not hard to predict. Right? Now, that being said, I think they won 30-24. I think they went to overtime today against Indy. I think they gave up a lead and had to hold on, but they won in overtime, right? I think that Phillip Rivers is probably going to go to the Hall of Fame, still playing at a high level. Chargers are a team that a lot of people like in the AFC. Certainly high playoff potential, maybe challenge for more. The team that played the first 2+ quarters in Arizona today can play with the Chargers. Now, the reality is that the Cardinals helped early, right? They helped early. Phillip Rivers isn't going to do that. The Chargers aren't going to do that. So this has the potential to be ugly, right? But my prediction is that after the tie loss, they're going to take a public thrashing, similar to what I've been doing for the last, hour and 20 minutes or so. But they deserve it, quite frankly. They deserve it. But they'll play well. I'm pretty sure in our rundown, I said this was a loss. I think they're a better football team. Now, much like the Lions showed today, the better football team can only show up and play, 45 minutes instead of 60, and you can get a tie loss or a real loss. I don't expect the Chargers to do that. And I don't expect the coaching staff of the Lions to own what they did today. So I think the coaching staff is going to be a challenge all year. I think this podcast will spend a lot of time talking about game management, talking about the use of timeouts, talking about penalties, talking about coaching or coach impacting plays and decisions. I think that's going to be a consistent theme. I almost want to create a whole section of how did the coaches blow it today. There's a temptation to do that. But in terms of play on the field, with the exception of Taylor Decker and Jamal Agnew, the team played pretty well within the parameters of the crappy scheme that the coaches decided to implement later in the game. I don't know that they can beat the Chargers. I think the Chargers are a better team. I would expect the Chargers to come in after playing relatively sloppy against the Colts today and bring a really good performance. Now, the game's at Ford Field. Does that matter? I don't know. We don't know. Every year is different. We'll see. But right now, I don't feel good about next week. That's the short answer. I don't feel good about next week. But we will do it again, good, bad, or ugly. So I want to thank everyone for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what I need. I need a review. I need a rating. I need them stars. all 5 of them, you to feel free, like I said, to go up and hit us on Twitter at CityRoar, CityRoar. If you're old school, shoot us an email at roarmotorcity@gmail.com. I want to thank my super producer, Mike Ward, for putting in the time and the energy for this ridiculous fiasco. Mike will remind you of all the places you can find the podcast. I want to give a special thanks for our new musical ads to Verified Picasso, Wayne Jones, Density and Time, The Grand Affair, Young Logos, spelled Y-U-N-G, Diamond Ortiz, and MK2. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Talk to you next time.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. If you're listening this far, if you made it this far, I apologize for Demetrius. Kidding. I love the dude. Thank you so much for listening, for sticking around. Wherever you're listening to us right now, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify. Demetrius already told you where we're at on Twitter. That's at CityRoar, or Facebook.com/CityRoar, if you'd rather do the Book of Faces. Man, what else? If you want to email us, you can email us at roarmotorcity@gmail.com. If you got any questions or concerns or anything you just want to add to next week's podcast, hope to hear from you. If you want to leave some comments down below or wherever you're at right now, just shoot them right at us. Thanks guys. Thanks again. See you real soon.